following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners on Saga 960 AM and those listening around the world on streaming and podcast services. This is the first It's Not Therapy of 2023. I'm still Liana and I'm still not a therapist, but I am your source for practical advice for everyday problems, using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This episode, like I said, it's a new year, which means New Year's resolutions. So we're going to talk about how to make changes that stick. Now, I was going to come back last week, but one change I promised myself I'm going to make is that I'm going to overwork myself less. You notice I did not say I'm not going to overwork myself, just overwork myself less. Reasonable goals, right? Anyway, last week, I was still exhausted, so I took my own advice and made changes. If you've got a specific question about how to make changes, give me a call, 289-275-9600. That's 289-275-9600. Or you can email me at liana.nottherapyshow. If that's too much to remember, you can go to nottherapyshow.com, fill out that contact form, or shoot me a message on Twitter and Instagram. I've been doing a lot more Instagram lately, not sure if I like it. Okay, changes. I heard a quote once. I don't remember exactly who said it. Someone who was involved with Middle East peace talks, negotiating the Good Friday Agreement, something like that. But he said, when war is more expensive than peace, there's peace. When peace is more expensive than war, there's war. And that's as succinct a way as I've ever seen to describe how really tough changes happen. When it comes to personal struggles, calculating those costs can be trickier. So my goal here is to help clarify things that way. I'm going to go back to my concept of happy math. Happy math is the calculations you do to maximize your happiness and minimize your efforts over the long run. So if there's something in your life that makes you unhappy, it could be that it'll make you more unhappy to change it. That's totally valid. If so, don't. But if a change is going to make you happier, then the effort is probably worth it. But effort is hard, right? And yet, if we make the right changes, we actually expend less effort over time because we're not constantly navigating crises, trauma, and breakdowns. Let's take a simple thing that people tend to want to change at this time of year. Physically healthier habits. I know, we're going right for a cliche, but it's a common cliche. What a lot of people do with healthier habits in the new year is to dive in head first, make a bunch of radical changes, end up tired, sore, headachy, and miserable, and they quit by February because they wanted an instant quick fix instead of lifelong changes in habits. And no surprise, that ends up not working because it's bad happy math. Top 10 phrase, healthy goals are based on things you can control. Another top 10 phrase, self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. If you're knocking yourself out based on unrealistic goals, that's a one-way ticket to misery. And that's what I was doing in 2022. Yeah, I caught myself eventually. Experts agree that the goal to making lasting changes is to make small changes that you can reasonably accomplish. Say, adding 10 minutes of physical activity every 2 weeks as opposed to extreme dieting and intense workouts all at once. Yeah, you're not going to drop 10 pounds in water weight in a month with 10 minutes extra a week. But do you want a quick fix or do you want a lasting change? The right answer is you want a lasting change. It's also important to happy math that you make changes for motivating reasons. People don't stick with fitness goals based on looking better as much as they stick with them when they feel better. Gradual increases will help you feel better. Sudden intense shifts will make you headachy, sore, and miserable. And when you're like that, who cares how much allegedly better you look? But what about internal changes? Now, it seems the scariest changes for people to make are these personal changes because they're the ones that are most likely to result in temporary negative social consequences. Now, I was that person once. When I was in trauma therapy, I kept getting told that the people around me weren't helping me. But I had a childhood where I was picked on and ostracized and blamed for a lot of things I didn't do, and I didn't want to hurt anyone the way I'd been hurt. But eventually it became clear that the people telling me that my social circle sucked were right. I had no idea how right they were, though, until I distanced myself from that group. Of course, that group labeled me a troublemaker, even blacklisted me from some events, but that was no big loss since I didn't want to go to those events anymore anyway. Social and environmental changes are difficult because in the long term, these impacts can be pretty rough. If you're in a bad social environment, those people aren't going to take it well when you set boundaries or make changes. They may even act like change in itself is bad. That's an attempt to make problems that aren't your fault into mistakes that are. If someone faults you for changes you're making to be happier, healthier, and have better boundaries, that's a them problem, not a you problem. Now, obviously, you're making changes because of you problems that you've identified, and that's good. We all have them, says the chronic overwork or burnout. Yeah, I don't exclude myself from the you problem issues. But how do we separate the them problems from you problems so that you can make the right changes? This is why healthy boundaries are so important. You can't decide what you want to change if you can't tell where you end and other people begin. That's why, top 10, people don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. Okay. Here are some indications that you need better boundaries. Are you tired all the time? Do you feel like you're constantly doing for other people and they don't reciprocate? Are you afraid to say no in general or to specific people? Are you frequently saying things like, that's just the way they are, or they don't mean to hurt me? Do you constantly feel stressed or unsafe? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you'd probably benefit from better boundaries. Now, abusive relationships are abusive because they tear down boundaries or they don't allow them to form in the first place. So it's okay if your boundaries need work. Abusive people don't respect boundaries. So if someone is a boundary buster, that's not your failing, but you deserve so much better. Now, boundaries don't mean you'll never fight with someone, and they don't mean that you can't be flexible or make exceptions. But these exceptions are made for people who respect that you set boundaries and who can accept the word no. It's something you're going to choose to do, not something you feel forced to do, right? It's very important that the people around you respect that you don't like something and would like them to stop. They're not going to be able to, say, remove a word from their vocabulary instantly, but it becomes evident pretty quickly who's really putting in the effort and who keeps making excuses. One of the most common types of boundary busters I encounter is the explainer type. People who can tell you every reason in the world why your boundaries are stupid and irrational or impossible or something like that. And the truth is, it doesn't matter. They're your boundaries. If they don't like them, they don't have to associate with you. Of course, many explainers truly believe that they respect boundaries, but they really don't, because they don't realize that boundaries mean stop doing the thing. Don't explain why you did the thing. Stop doing the thing. A lot of explainers don't have great boundaries themselves. They feel blamed when you set a boundary, even though you're not blaming them. You just want whatever behavior you've said you didn't like to stop. Another group that feels blamed when you set boundaries are the guilters. I'm sure you've encountered these type of boundary busters. When you ask them to stop doing something, they wax poetic about how difficult it is for them, how terrible you're making them feel, and how selfish you're being. It hurts to be on the receiving end of a guilter, but you can still and center yourself enough to really listen to what they're saying, and you'll realize that it doesn't make any sense. A simple request for a change isn't that hard to at least attempt to accommodate. That's the power of the top 10 phrase. Listen twice before you talk once. Guilters will bombard you with emotion, but they don't really make sense. Then there are the self-righteous boundary busters, people who believe that your boundaries violate something important in them. It's not true, and again, it's a sign that they don't have healthy boundaries themselves. People are entitled to think whatever they want. That's their core values. That's them. Now, where they end and you begin is that they're not entitled to do or say anything they want to other people, no matter what they believe. Now, you see these self-righteous boundary busters all over news and social media. Those railing against alleged infringements on their rights or their speech. Here's the thing. Boundaries are not a free speech issue. Boundaries are boundaries. People have freedom from speech as well as freedom of speech. Simple, no compromises. People don't have the right to talk to people in ways those people don't like. Period. Now, many people do talk to people in ways they don't like, but you don't have to take it. And I can hear a lot of people saying, yes, I do, either at work or at family. And that's an indication that those places, those groups are an abusive environment. Now, abusive environments are also full of the last type of boundary buster I'm going to talk about, the make-me's. Make-me's are people who see boundaries as made to be broken. So they needle, taunt, and outright defy you to prove the point that you can't make them do anything. Make me. That's why they're called make-me's, right? These people are bullies and, based on the vocabulary, pretty immature. They sound like 6-year-olds who won't go to bed, right? It's something most adults grow out of, but not all. And there are reasons for this, but those aren't your problem until the make me behavior boundary busting stops. Now, what does any of this have to do with setting boundaries? How does knowing how your boundaries are broken help you set them and enforce them? Well, I'll get to that after the break. If you have a question, 289-275-9600, or you can shoot me an email, Liana at Not Therapy Show. You can fill out the contact form on nottherapyshow.com, or Twitter, Instagram at Not Therapy Show. I'm also on TikTok as Red Liana K, but I'm still figuring TikTok out. And I'm still figuring out segment timing. I apologize, a little bit rusty. We'll be back after this on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy, talking making changes in the new year. Before the break, I went through some types of challenging people who don't respect boundaries and will get in the way of the changes you want to make for a happier, healthier you. If you'd like some specifics on this issue or any other you hear on this show, 289-275-9600. Liana at nottherapyshow.com is my email. That's Liana at nottherapyshow. Or go to nottherapyshow.com and fill out the contact form. Or Not Therapy Show on Twitter and Instagram. Now, I went through those types of boundary busting people because social and environmental changes, as I said, are some of the hardest to make because of these people who don't respect boundaries. Thanks to these people, and they are everywhere, things tend to get worse before they get better when you make changes involving the people around you. I'm telling this so you're prepared when it happens. So you know it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a feature, not a bug. Let's face it, real talk here. When you want to make changes, insecure people are going to feel like it's about them. Because insecurity looks a lot like narcissism on the outside. Changes you're making for you are usually not about them, the people who are insecure. Now, if they are, well, what does that say? If you're in a situation with someone where it's you or them, that's an untenable situation. I heard a really great metaphor for the types of relationships that we form. The metaphor uses a book that's the story of our life. The majority of people we meet only take up a sentence or two in that book. Some take up a paragraph or multiple paragraphs. Other people are included in entire chapters of the story of our lives. But only a few people are truly main characters throughout our story. I keep that in mind when I find myself realizing that it's better to part ways with someone than continue to throw good energy after bad. It's still hard, though. It's sad when someone won't walk with you when you want better for yourself. I recently had a falling out with someone, not sure if it's permanent, but this person was very, very upset that apparently I'd changed. Now, in this particular case, I don't believe I had in the relevant ways, which made it more difficult because I couldn't even give them that. It wouldn't have been true. It was about a viewpoint, and I held the same views I always did. But I did realize my views hadn't changed. I'd been setting boundaries based on those views, based on those core values, but I hadn't been enforcing them. There'd been no consequence that this person understood for violating those boundaries. So they missed all the boundary setting. They just weren't aware the boundaries were there because, well, there was no reason not to ignore them. That's the tricky thing about boundaries. Enforcement can be hard sometimes, especially when people are clueless. It's painful for everyone when someone involved literally does not understand what boundaries mean. And that's literal, not figurative, literal. Some people don't understand what boundaries are and what they do. In our hyper-partisan, information-bombarding age, lack of understanding of boundaries is everywhere because news messaging, political messaging, it's all designed to wear down people's boundaries through enragement and fear. Marketing is designed to wear down your boundaries through enticement and aspiration and false affirmation. It's everywhere. There are so many forces in our world teaching us not to have healthy boundaries. And if you've been bad at boundaries to this point, it's likely most of the people around you are too. Because people with healthy boundaries end up surrounding themselves with people who understand and respect them. So when you start setting and enforcing boundaries, expect fireworks. Because we don't live in a world that teaches boundaries. We live in a world of grow a thicker skin. Oh, do I hate the phrase grow a thicker skin, but more on that in a future show. Because boundaries are so important, it's good to tell the people around you what you're trying to do when you make changes. In general, people have been pretty supportive of the changes I'm making to be less chronically exhausted, though the least popular one is clearly the reduction in the amount of abuse I'm willing to take from other people, which has meant getting rid of certain people. See the pattern? If they're not supportive, if they don't listen, if they push back too much, they gotta go. And that brings us to the question of what support is. Because it isn't blindly following someone down a road that is going to bring misery. The way I think about true support is a structure that's called the dignity of risk. Now, I didn't come up with this. This comes from independent living principles for people with disabilities. Dignity of risk means that adults have the right to try things that they might fail at, as long as they're willing to accept the predictable consequences if things go wrong. And we set those predictable consequences via a discussion right at the beginning of a journey to change for better. Possible consequences obviously include, what if I fail? How are you going to handle the disappointment? And no, I'm just going to handle it is not an answer here. What we're looking for is something like, if I fail, I'll still reward myself for making the attempt and I'll try again. This is the time to ask your supporters for the things you need to feel supported. Be clear, communicate. They're not mind readers, and you shouldn't expect anyone to read your mind. For instance, if you don't want to hear, I told you so, if this doesn't work, say so now. Or say something like, it would be helpful to hear words of support every so often because this is going to be hard for me. Or what you ask for can be more practical. Stuff like, please understand that I'm not going to be able to hang out as much for a while and don't give me a hard time about it or guilt me about it. or something really simple like, I need help with household tasks or shopping or getting organized or something like that. People want to be useful. People want to help, but they want to know they're getting it right. If you give the people around you a reasonable chance of success in supporting you, you're going to have a bigger chance of success of meeting your change goals. Some people find the idea of an accountability buddy helpful as well. Accountability buddies are people who keep you on track and remind you what you set out to do and why. That and why is very important. It's really important that you can communicate why you're making the changes you're making. Now, the most important reason is to make sure you know why you're making the changes you're making. Change, good change, lasting change, positive change doesn't come out of feeling so desperate that you're just flailing for something, anything to get better. That usually results in a lateral move. Really sit with why you're making these particular changes. What do you hope they'll do? Are you doing this because you want to or because you feel forced to? Do you truly believe this is the right direction, or are you just playing whack-a-mole because you don't know what to do? This is the time for your supporters to ask any questions they may have so they can support you as best that they can in accordance with their own boundaries. This is the time to have the conversation of what they can do for you, what they can't do for you, what their concerns are, maybe even make, alternate suggestions that you haven't thought of. This is a very important part of the process for success, because setting expectations, asking for support, this sounds so obvious, but people miss it. Having these things, everybody being on the same page, all rowing together, maximizes your chances of success. It may take some work getting used to asking for things. It will feel weird at first, probably. But it's so much more effective than making people guess what you're up to, especially when it involves cutting ties with the toxic portion of your social group. It helps so much when the people you trust know what you're doing, so they can help you steer clear of the bad crowd, and they can keep an eye and ear open for you. Setting the reasons why you're making the changes are also important for when you get into the process and find out, things aren't working out as planned. And after this commercial break, we'll talk about how to change your changes when you don't find that they're working out the way that you'd hoped. So if you got questions, if this has inspired you, 289-275-9600. That's 289-275-9600. Liana at Not Therapy Show is my email, Liana at Not Therapy Show. Or real simple, contact form on nottherapyshow.com. You can fill that out if email isn't your thing. Or at Not Therapy Show on Twitter and Instagram if you love social media. Some people love social media. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but that's neither here nor there. I'll be back in a bit on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I am Liana Kersner, and we're talking making changes. And now we're going to talk about what to do when you need to change the changes you've made. I've had this issue with health stuff. I have an autoimmune disease, so I have a love-hate relationship with exercise, like my love-hate relationship with social media. I know exercise is good for me, and sometimes I enjoy it because overall it does make me feel better. But if I overdo it, exercise makes me feel like I've been hit by a bus. Now, I only found out a few years ago that it was possible to over-exercise. I thought the more the better. I'd been doing it wrong for decades. But then there's the other side of it, right? Go easy, but I keep reading these articles about how important it is to get 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week. And when I hurt everywhere and I'm working 14-hour days, it can seem pretty hopeless to get that 150 minutes in. So I was really struggling and I went back to boundaries. I recognized my own limits and I realized that while the 150 minutes isn't ideal, I had to listen to my body more than the news articles I was reading. So I changed my goal from 150 minutes a week to 5 extra minutes a week. Now, that's actually working out pretty well. And I actually managed to hit 150 minutes this week, which, strangely enough, I could never do when I was trying to do it because I was overdoing it. I gradually worked up and it happened without me realizing it until it had happened. Sometimes successful changes are completely counterintuitive that way, which is why I say healthy goals are based on things you can control, and self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. I can't control the fact that my body frequently decides to rebel on me. I can listen to it and stop trying to push it to do things that it's just not going to do. I'm doing my best. I'm not trying for the ideal. Top 10 phrase, perfect is a lie. Stop trying to be perfect. That's why it's important to set why you're making a change. So if the change isn't working out, you can change the change. You can redirect and get closer to hitting that mark, that finish line. But what about this social environmental stuff? How does it work that way? How do you change the changes in your environment and your social group? Now, social environmental changes, as I keep stressing, are so full of so many subjective variables. So it's extra important to make corrections as you go and keep your support system, those people you talk to about making the change in the first place, informed of your changes. Now, some of you may not know, I'm making a video game as well as doing this mental health work, and COVID has wreaked havoc on the development process of that game. So we've had to make some changes because we're all getting whacked by this thing. But we did a crowdfund for startup money on the game. And we've had to keep the backers informed of those changes that we made. Nobody expected it to be this bad. I didn't expect COVID to take 4 months of my life, and I'm still 85%. Now there's other people that are struggling the same way, but we've kept the backers informed. And because the backers get regular updates, they don't mind the bumps in the road so much. I'm sure some of them grumble, they're disappointed, but they understand overall. Now, of course, this isn't an example a lot of people directly relate to. So let's try another one, leaving a toxic environment. Now, this is a really common one, and a few personal clients have really extreme examples of this very dicey process. I started working with one client on his trauma related to a toxic environment, which included, and periodically still includes, harassment, online stalking, and even false criminal charges filed against him. But finding a new environment and a group of people to be friends with has proved to be a frustrating and discouraging game of trial and error, thanks to COVID lockdown and people's hesitancy to gather in public groups. So this guy went back to one of the events that the bad people were at. Now that's totally understandable that he thought things should have calmed down by now. It's been years. Unfortunately, they hadn't calmed down and the online harassment happened again. Now, obviously, this isn't a tenable situation. This sort of social terrorizing of someone falls into a category of behavior that lawyers and law enforcement call lawful but awful. Sadly, it's totally legal for people to lie about you and accuse you of crimes, unless they're actively trying to get someone to physically harm you. That's criminal, trying to get somebody to physically harm you. Reputational damage isn't criminal. You have to sue, and that's expensive and rarely ends well. That only works if somebody's got money to take. So what's this guy going to do? Finding new friends is tough. You can't force it. It takes time. And how does he manage in the meantime with COVID limitations? That's what I meant by a really frustrating, discouraging game of trial and error. Now we've started to do some online hangouts, some small group get-togethers at restaurants, stuff like that. Piece by piece, brick by brick. This hasn't replaced what he lost, but it's a start. And it's important to keep in mind that change is change. You're never going to get back exactly what you had, and it's bad crazy making to expect or want that. The before times weren't sustainable or healthy, remember? But when you're lonely, it's easy to put on those rose-colored glasses about the past. So things like journaling can be helpful so you can look back and see how hard it actually was at the time. It gives you a good sense of perspective. This client right now is in the time I've been talking about all show, when things get harder before they get easier. Now, in his case, this change wasn't a choice. It was impossible to return to his old social circle because of the malicious gossip. Whether that makes it easier or harder is sort of a case-by-case basis thing. However, in no case is this sort of thing easy. I've had to do it myself more than once in my life. It's caused me to not keep all my friendships in one social circle or area of interest. So I'm not left with nothing if something goes bad in one place. And it took a while for me to work through the trauma of all the lying and betrayal. And a big part of working through that was separating the lessons learned on my part from stuff that I couldn't have known, I couldn't have controlled, and wasn't in any way my fault. And it's time for another break. When I come back, some closing thoughts. If this episode has inspired you, drop me a message at Liana at Not Therapy Show. That's Liana at Not Therapy Show. Or contact on the Not Therapy Show website, nottherapyshow.com. There's a contact form right there. You can fill it out. Or Twitter, Instagram, Not Therapy Show. We'll be back for one more segment after this. Stay tuned. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy, talking, making changes in the new year. I am Liana Kirsner. I'm still not a therapist, and I'm going to end this show by giving you some things you can tell yourself to make making changes less painful. Sometimes the right headspace is the difference between success or failure. And sometimes finding the right words is tough because you're overwhelmed. If you have feedback on this or any other part of the show, you can shoot me an email, Liana at nottherapyshow.com, or fill out the contact form on nottherapyshow.com or Not Therapy Show on Twitter and Instagram. Okay, here we go. Some things you can tell yourself while making tough changes. First thing's about overwhelmed. You can say, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not done. Breathe. Another thing you can say is, all I have to be is a better me today than I was yesterday. I like this one a lot. I am the expert of what's best for me. Another one is, it's hard now, so it'll be easier later. I chose this. I can do this. Being alone is okay. Being surrounded by people who hurt me isn't. Another version of that is, being alone is powerful. Another version is, I'm alone, but I don't have to be lonely. Another one I really like is, I am more capable than I know. That's true for everybody. I will be kinder to myself today than the world is another one I really like. When you start feeling flustered and feeling like you're screwing up, tell yourself, I'm learning, as an alternative to negative self-talk. When you have a bad day, tell yourself, tomorrow is a fresh start. Bad days happen. We all have them. They are not a character flaw. If you have to end a relationship, say, I didn't lose a friend. I lost a relationship that wasn't working anymore. If someone gets upset when you set a boundary, tell yourself, someone being upset with me doesn't mean I did anything wrong. If someone tries to bust your boundary, tell yourself, this is a them problem, not a me problem. If someone succeeds in busting your boundary, tell yourself that's on them, not me. I can't force them to listen. If you have to deal with an angry person, tell yourself a lot of this is just noise. They're acting out of insecurity, fear, and self-blame. And if you lose your cool, be gentle with yourself and tell yourself, what did I learn? What do I do different next time? This is why we make mistakes. Feel free to add to this list as you find stuff that works for you. Now, I've talked a lot on this show about the hard parts of change. But there are a lot of good things too. When the changes start to take hold, life is so much better. You have so much more hope and energy to focus on your other goals. You'll feel a deeper connection with people. You'll feel more accepted, and you'll just like yourself more and feel more comfortable in your own skin. It goes without saying, but I'm saying it anyway just in case. This journey is never really over. It's important for people to strive, to have goals, to reach for something better. Now, it's okay to take breaks from goal setting to just be. In some circles, that's called mindfulness periods, where you just check in with yourself and observe how you're doing. But it's healthy to have short, medium, and long-term goals and find increasingly positive ways to work towards them. Now, about those positive ways. Intent matters so very much here. I want to reiterate that changes you feel forced to make don't stick. But recognizing that you need to change something can feel like swallowing a big ol' helping of humble pie, and sometimes that can get stuck in your throat. It can be really hard to admit that old habits aren't working for you anymore, and it can feel very strange to change ways of doing things that you've learned in childhood. So change, even when it is a choice, sometimes doesn't feel like a choice. Now, for this reason, change can produce a lot of anxiety. And this is another reason a lot of people stop. They give up. Change is too hard. We've made anxiety into this thing some people believe we should be avoiding at all costs, that any anxiety is bad and disordered. But a healthy amount of anxiety is a part of life. We all feel it sometimes. That's not the same as an anxiety disorder. The same way that feeling down for a little while doesn't mean you're clinically depressed. There's a difference as well between good uncomfortable and bad uncomfortable. Good discomfort has an edge of excitement at the possibilities. You're uncomfortable because you don't want to screw up, because getting it right will be so good. Bad uncomfortable is just bad. It's a fear of punishment or social recriminations and nothing else. You want to let that good discomfort guide you away from the bad discomfort, because that bad discomfort is a sign that something is very wrong. Now, it can be hard to tell the difference between good discomfort and bad discomfort when you felt that bad discomfort your whole life. But with practice, you'll get it. I believe in you. Good discomfort is a great thing to embrace because it's a sign that you're growing. It's not wanting to disappoint people because you care about them, not because you're afraid of them. It's seeing the possible and letting yourself want it. Good discomfort goes hand in hand with knowing how to handle failure. And let's face it, no one is actively good at handling failure. Failure sucks, but it doesn't have to destroy you. Supportive people and positive self-talk go a long way to making failure suck less, but planning for potential fail states is also useful. What? Liana, you're encouraging us to plan to fail? Hear me out. I mentioned I'm making a video game earlier, right? So let's look at changes like a video game. In video games, you hit fail states, you die, right? You lose a life as part of the game. Do you quit the first time you lose one of your fictional lives? Of course not. Losing a couple lives is part of the game. Now, making difficult changes is the same way. Hear me out here. If you set the expectation that you're going to be perfect, you're going to lose no video game lives right away, is that reasonable? No, of course not. You're going to be disappointed. That's why you make fail states part of the plan. You plan in the fails so you don't feel like a failure. It's way easier to stay motivated when the slip-ups, the screw-ups, and the setbacks are features, not bugs of your program. Even the really hard games, the really, really hard ones in the 1980s and the 1990s gave the player 3 lives. Even a game series called Dark Souls, you may have heard the game Elden Ring. Yeah, they punish screw-ups a lot in those games, but it's not the end. You can try again. Life is more like that than the unreasonable expectations a lot of us put on ourselves. Now, that's not always true, right? Sometimes things happen and you don't get another chance. It could be fair, it could be not fair. But that's just the end of that path. That's that sentence or the paragraph in the book of your life story that I talked about. Not the whole thing, right? You find another way. You regroup. You make a new plan. But so many people are raised to believe that you're a loser if you make mistakes. And as widespread as that is, as many people as I see who are terrified of making mistakes, especially social mistakes. Mistakes are a part of life. Yeah, they're embarrassing. But the people around you shouldn't be making you completely miserable about them. That's a sign that something is very wrong. Now, a lot of you are probably getting defensive right now because of this thing in the culture we call cancel culture, right? That people are terrified of. They're terrified of making a social faux pas that they believe will be it, the end. I've done a whole show on cancel culture, but people are really terrified of this. And here's the truth, okay? You've been listening long enough to me right now. You know I wouldn't lie to you about that stuff. Strangers can't really cancel you if the people in your immediate group have your back. If they know you and you've been upfront and honest with them and you've done that advanced planning that I talked about earlier in the show, the opinions of strangers cannot ruin your life. The opinions of casual acquaintances cannot ruin your life. That stuff happens, especially when you didn't actually do the things you're being accused of, or the things you did are being blown completely out of proportion. That can only happen when the people immediately around you do not have your back. I've been there many times. This was a lesson that it took me, I shouldn't say far too long to learn, but I would have been better off if I'd had somebody telling me what I'm about to tell you. You know, deep down in your gut, if you trust the people you live with, you work with, and you socialize with. You know if you tune out the clutter. Now, if people started saying nasty things about you, would those people have your back? Don't even think about it. Just answer. Now, if the answer is yes, great. Could you be wrong? Sure. But the fact that you had that immediate reaction is a good sign. But if the answer is no, if you don't trust the people around you, that either means something's very wrong or you have trust issues that could be hampering you from forming those bonds and actually make you more likely to get canceled and not less when you make a mistake. You have to take little risks early on to see if people have your back. And that will mean mistakes will be easier later on. Because one, people know you. They know you mean well. They've had enough of a taste of you, so to speak, that they know that any mistakes you made were with the best of intentions, not nefarious intent. And it's very important to learn to admit mistakes and admit them as often as you can sincerely. Because then, in a healthy group of people, when you actually say, I did not do this, this is not what they claim, the people around you believe you because you have a track record of owning up earlier, owning up when you actually thought you were wrong. And these building blocks often don't happen in relationships. And so when something does change suddenly, when something does get bad, it's a catastrophe. And one of those can be enough to put people into perpetual panic mode and set themselves up for basically living life on video game hard mode, where every mistake is brutally punished, instead of an easier mode or normal mode where things are more regular, even though I don't like the name normal. God of War Ragnarok gives me balance. I'll say balanced mode. There we are. And I have to balance time. We have like 2 minutes left, and if you are new to this program, I've been giving out the contact information all show, but I screwed up the email address. Remember I said about admitting the mistakes? Yeah, I missed the .com on my email address and website. Liana at nottherapyshow.com. Lian as in Nancy A at nottherapyshow.com. That's how email addresses work. So do websites. The contact form on nottherapyshow.com. I'm brain farting a lot this week. Or social media, Twitter, Instagram, at nottherapyshow. Check out my Instagram for more observations on life, more tips, more tricks. I try to do a weekly video that ends up being good crazy. I do a lot of screen caps of tweets I put up because Instagram has to be pictures, and I don't want pictures all of the time. I am a person of ideas. My mind is me. So I found a way. I actually saw this from a rabbi on Twitter. I just screen cap my tweets and put them on Instagram. And this is how you social media duplicate content whenever you can. Anyway, thanks for being with me so far. If you're new, welcome. Here's to a happy, healthy, productive, and prosperous, go Star Trek there, 2023. Why did I say 2013? Okay, it's time to stop. We are out. Thank you for watching, listening. The first episode of It's Not Therapy of 2023. Took a while to get the rust off. I'm not sure the rust is totally off. I'm a ginger. It's ginger, not rust. Anyway, things are getting nuts here. I'm starting to lose it. I'm Liana Kersner. I am still not a therapist. You may have noticed. Remember, your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next time.